Opinion polls in Russia show Vladimir Putin heading for victory in the upcoming presidential election. He hopes to take the sting out of an urban protest movement which casts him as an authoritarian leader who rules through a corrupt political system. So, what chance do the other presidential contenders have? And do they have reason to call it an unfair election? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome, I'm Adrian Finnegan. Last December, the Russian Prime Minister's political party, United Russia, performed poorly in parliamentary elections, losing more than 70 seats in the 450-member state Duma, the lower house of the Federal Assembly of Russia. Suspicions of fraud emerged following exit polls that predicted an even wider defeat, striking a blow to democracy in Russia. Another punch came when Mr. Putin said that he'd planned all along to swap seats with President Dmitry Medvedev in 2012. This didn't sit well with many young Russians who were raised with the hope of a democratic Russia, compelling them to take to the streets to voice their opposition over the past few weeks. But on Thursday, tens of thousands attended a rally in support of the Russian Prime Minister. Some of them said they were forced or were paid to attend. Others came from thousands of miles away. Al Jazeera's Rory Challens reports from Moscow.
With so much recent attention on Russia's opposition movements, this was a chance for Vladimir Putin to strike back. A carefully orchestrated display of patriotism and support. Tens of thousands of people, 130,000 according to the police, showing that Putin isn't losing his grip.
Putin наш президент! Ура!
Putin is our president.
We support Putin. We don't want changes. We like the way it is now.
Calm and stability.
This was no spontaneous gathering. Buses had brought people from thousands of kilometers away. Some people told us they had no choice.
Everyone was forced to come here. We all work for government organisations.
I wasn't.
But I was. I might get fired, and I've got 3 kids to feed.
Whether these people are true Vladimir Putin supporters or not, the latest poll puts him on 58% of the vote, which would give him comfortably enough support to win the presidency in the first round.
Inside Luzhniki Stadium, the Prime Minister had strong words for the outside forces he's long accused of meddling in Russian politics.
We will not let anyone interfere with our internal affairs. We will not let anyone impose their will on us, because we have our own will.
Also rallying in Moscow on Thursday were Gennady Zyuganov's communists and the nationalist Liberal Democrats of Vladimir Zhirinovsky. But Putin's event was the biggest, and thanks to state-controlled TV, the most widely covered. Just 10 days before the election, he's making sure the attention is back on him. Rory Challens, Al Jazeera, Moscow.
Well, the decision on who can run for president is determined to some extent by Russian electoral legislation. Parties represented in parliament have the right to propose a candidate, while others need to collect 2 million signatures in their support. A significant number of potential candidates for the presidency have been rejected by the Russian Central Elections Commission. Reasons range from not informing the commission about holding a meeting in due time to invalid signatures. 5 candidates have been successfully registered and will run for presidency. They are Prime Minister Vladimir Putin, candidate of United Russia. Putin served 2 terms as president before. While he holds about 55% of support, none of the other candidates has more than 10%. They are Gennady Zyuganov, nominated by the Communist Party of the Russian Federation. Zyuganov is running second at this point in the presidential race. The 67-year-old communist has already fought and lost several previous presidential elections. Vladimir Zhirinovsky, nominated by the Liberal Democratic Party of Russia. Now, he's an experienced populist and has a long history of public scandals. Zhirinovsky has stood in presidential elections before. His percentage of the vote has been consistently lower than that of his party in parliamentary elections. Mikhail Prokhorov is the only independent candidate. The billionaire is rising in the polls as a leader for Russia's growing liberal middle classes. Prokhorov's political career began last year when he was, at time, leader of the right-wing Cause Party. He says a new Russia needs a new president. And finally, Sergei Mironov is the candidate of the Fair Russia Party. Putin brought him into his circle in 2000 by arranging for his election as Speaker of the Upper House of Parliament. When he lost his role as Speaker in 2011, he announced that Fair Russia was turning into a genuine opposition force. So, what chance do other contenders have, and do they have reason to call it an unfair election? To help us answer this question, we're joined by our guests today in Moscow. Sergei Alexandrovich Markov, a Russian political analyst. Also in Moscow, Ilya Faybisovich, a political activist who's coordinated a number of the recent protests calling for free elections. And in London, Vlad Strukov, Associate Professor in Russian New Media at the University of Leeds. Gentlemen, thank you all for being with us today. Ilya Faybisovich, is Putin's victory in the presidential election a foregone conclusion?
In a way, I think it is, yes, or in any way he will be declared the winner of this presidential election on paper. Whether this will give him the mandate he is hoping for, whether this is really what he wants, is a completely different question, I think.
So will it be a decisive victory, do you think, or will it go to a second round? And if it does go to a second round, will that be humiliating for Putin?
Well, that depends on what you call a decisive victory. In recent years in Russia, a decisive victory would bring him 70–80% of the vote. It's not going to happen this time. This much we know for sure. It's very difficult, I think, to put him above 60%, even if he want to. And if there is a second round, I think that it's not necessarily humiliation. It's never a humiliation in a proper democratic election. It will be some sort of a setback for Putin, and it will be very difficult to predict what happens in that second round, especially since we don't know the identity of the other contender in this round.
Sergei Markov, Putin then, it seems, set to lead again. Is that good for Russia?
Of course, Russians think that's very good for Russia, because as we remember, when Putin came to power, Russia had been in absolute catastrophic situation. I should remember that in 90s we have not democratic reform, but absolute catastrophe, which led to the diminishing of Russian populations, almost on the 10 millions of people, which comparable with Nazi invasion, which has also destroyed economical, social, and political institutions. And it was a total catastrophe for the country, and now Russia became normal country. Next mandate from Russian people to Vladimir Putin to move already from normal to good country. It means to develop industry, to develop democratic institutions, to develop education, a health system, and to diminish corruption. And Russians believe that everything, all these things will be done as another also goals should be already have been reached by Vladimir Putin. All sociological polls show very stable that Vladimir Putin has popularity which allow him to win in first round with something about 60%. And all sociological polls, I want to say to Mr. Faybisovich, we know that now some so-called radical anti-system opposition, there's some kind of falsificator of observing of elections. You know, we know the case when authorities sometimes making falsification of result of elections. Now we have very interesting case in Russia when we have falsificator among the observers of elections. We know this technology very much. It's a attempt of Orange Revolution, and Russian people will stop Orange Revolution for sure. We're
okay, all right.
Winners
so,
already.
Sergei, we'll get some response to that in just a moment. But first, let's bring in our third guest today, Vlad Strukov. Are you satisfied, Vlad, with the processes, laws, the transparency for this election? Will it be free and fair?
I think I agree with the presenters actually, in the sense that the outcome of the elections are very important. The result is very important for Russia itself and the global community. But I wouldn't kind of undermine the importance of the political process that we see developing in Russia, and that process has been going on for the past probably 10 months. And what that process shows is that Russia is the process of constructing a very new way of approaching the electoral process as such. All sectors of the community are involved in the discussion of what it actually means to have fair elections, and they're discussing various models that they can bring in from abroad or they can generate in places. So I'm particularly happy about that this discussion is going on. Whether it will result in a radical change immediately or not, that I'm not sure.
And how important has social media and new media been in that discussion, as you say? I mean, unmasking the vote rigging in the Duma election late last year would have been impossible without Twitter, without Facebook.
Absolutely. I think new media have been absolutely instrumental in actually laying foundation for this political process and the very discussion that we have now. But again, I would probably highlight that this process had started a long time ago, actually the time when Putin was appointed the president of Russia. And so we are already looking at about a period of a decade when this discussion has been going on, and what we're having now is probably one of the earlier results of that historical process.
Ilya, what are we to make of the claim that some of the pro-Putin supporters at Thursday's rally had been paid to be there or forced to be there even? Do you think there's any substance to those accusations?
I certainly think there is, but the only thing I can say is that it's not for me to guess. It has been like this for this months. We think, or it's for everybody to see, put it this way, that there's been fraud in the Duma election, but probably Sergei Markov will tell you that there wasn't. And since the court has not said anything on the matter, we sort of assume there wasn't. And it's a very important highlight of what has been going on. Yes, it's almost obvious that many people who are in public sector have been forced to attend or somehow stimulated to attend this pro-Putin rallies. But the only questions I personally have are not to those people, but to the people who force them to do it. I would also like to respond to something of what Sergei Markov said. Even if Putin indeed did what he claims he has done, that is stabilize the country that was in a catastrophic state, which is a dubious claim in itself, what is happening now is that even the people who were broadly supporting him throughout all these years say that it's enough. Say that a person who has done his job, who's done something to this or that, is not a suitable person to go forward. It's not a good idea for the same person to lead the country for 12, 15, 20 years. And this is a very important driving factor of what has been going on. I would prefer not to respond to Orange Revolution claims. I would leave it to the audience to decide for themselves if there is any substance in it. I think that's for everybody who's following the processes in Russia in recent months, it's obvious that the only dialogue the protesters have had with the government is the only government's response is about Orange Revolution's threat, about protesters supposedly not loving Russia enough, as Vladimir Putin hinted yesterday at his rally, which I don't think is a constructive way to engage.
Okay, all right. Sergei Markov, respond to what you've just heard there. It's simply not healthy for Vladimir Putin to come back to power for another 6 years.
I think democracy is when a leader is supported by majority of the nation. And by the way, we have some problems with democratic institutions, including electoral process, of course. And I should remember that we had 10 years of catastrophe during the 90s, and every institution had been destroyed. And Vladimir Putin tried to recover a country But nevertheless, partly we have a heritage of this awful catastrophical 90s. And implementation of law, of course, sometimes we have problems with implementation law, including implementation of electoral law. And I would agree that result of a parliament election in Moscow and St. Pete, specifically in these two cities, maybe also in Yekaterinburg a little bit, should be recounted. And but nevertheless, of course, all sociology show very well that Vladimir Putin has very big support. And as I understand, free and fair result, it's when result called election committee, exactly as very close to result of sociological polls. And also let's touch about media. We had a period when most of the media had been controlled by the government, but it's not already now. You know, my daughter, I remember, asked me 4 years ago, oh, Papa, why you control everything? Why you don't allow criticize you? And 2 years ago, she already asked, oh, Papa, why you don't give the response? Because opposition absolutely clear to control all the most of the printed media. Right. Look at the printing media. They control by opposition on 80%. Look at the radio, which is extremely popular, you know, among the car drivers. They control, majority of them controlled by opposition. So now it's very difficult to the support of Vladimir Putin to get to reach to, for example, like Vedomosti, Kommersant, and other. So it's, when we see the opposition, it's very tough.
This is something I want to put to Vlad Strukov in particular about advertising, media campaigns for this election. What do you make of the fact that while 4 of the candidates have campaign ads running on TV and billboards, Putin doesn't? Why does his campaign not feel the need to campaign via traditional advertising, relying instead, as it does, on newspaper articles, televised meetings with supporters in news programs, that sort of thing?
I think it is because Putin is trying to engage with a new audience. He's trying to kind of cement supporters in areas of the society that traditionally have never supported power of any sort. But before I elaborate on that, I'd like to make a couple of points in relation to what was mentioned by the speakers before. And particularly what comes across very clearly to me is the gap between power and the people in the country. And what the speakers commented on is an indication of this gap and the unwillingness of the ruling elite to listen to its electorate and to engage in a proper public debate about the future of the country. The other point I'd like to make here, I think it's very unfair to try to build reputation on the past by claiming whether the 1990s were an era of destabilization and catastrophe, as Sergei pointed out, or any other period. I think what we should be looking for is a leader who is forward-looking and is actually presenting a program for the electorate that is based on the future, not on kind of a past achievement of any sort. Going back to your question about the role of media and the reason why Putin is running a different campaign is because I think it became very clear in the mid of this decade that there are certain areas of the society that do not actually watch television, they do not read the newspapers that are monitored by the Kremlin, but rather engage with other sources, for example, social media, blogs, and the internet in general. And so I think what Putin and generally people who work with him are trying to do these days is to engage with these new sectors of the society, trying to have a say in that domain as well.
All right. Ilya, why has the anti-Putin movement not been able to dent his popularity outside of the urban population centres, given what Vlad was just saying about access to social media and the internet?
Well, it's a tricky question because as we know, one of the difficult questions right now is how exactly to measure his popularity. I don't think we can all of us agree on that. It's part of that is that some of the sociological firms and agencies are firmly political, and another is that there are not enough of them. So actually, I don't, coming into this debate, I don't know what his true popularity is. I think the important limiting factor is that the opposition, whoever they are, and the opposition is a very strange construct right now. It's a very many people from a very wide political spectrum are only slowly starting to get TV presence. As Vlad correctly pointed out, there is a sort of a segmented, very fragmented information market, let's call it. So many people are getting their information from the social media, many people reading newspapers, a lot of Russians using their TV sets as the main source of information, and it's the opposition's views or the opposition's criticism of the way the campaign has been going on, or the way the Putin has made his mark, have not been aired enough, I think.
Ilya, very briefly, if you can, please, because we're rapidly running out of time here. Do any of the other presidential candidates stand a chance of causing an upset? What about Prokhorov, for instance?
Prokhorov, I think, is the only one worth discussing. I think he's a mystery. He's a mystery to me. He might even be a mystery to himself. I think the situation, the mood in Moscow, which is where I live and which is where I can feel the mood, is that the momentum is Prokhorov's to lose. Again, it's very difficult to say how many are going to vote for him, but I think it's been this number has been growing, and it's up to him what to do in the remaining weeks and now days of the campaign. He's the only candidate who can register an upset, and we'll be following this very closely.
Sergei Markov, how, as president, will Putin handle this growing anti-Putin movement and the calls for free and fair elections? And what do you think he's going to do about corruption, which is widely acknowledged to be the most serious deterrent to foreign investment in Russia? I know he's ordered state firms to clean up their acts, but surely that's just a PR stunt ahead of the election, isn't it?
About corruption, it's another case. Of course, corruption is a big problem for Russia as for many other countries, but in priority for Russia now, first of all, economic growth, which increasing standard of living, which have been dramatically undermined by catastrophic 90s. And we believe that this economic growth sometime will lead to the diminishing and corruption too. Look at Italy, which is a good example. Italy has been a very corrupted country in 50s and 60s, and nevertheless they have very good economic growth, up to 10%, which has made Italy quite prosperous country. And after Italy became a prosperous country, they started this clean hands operation against corruption. Now they are prosperous and already not so much corrupt, at least normally corrupt to European standards. It's, I think, will be our strategy too. But at the same time, I want to stress that such a discussion, debate, which sometimes opposition meant Ilya, it's exactly falsification of monitoring observation what I'm talking about. I'm sure that you know that no one political advisors will give advice to the candidate with a popularity of 60% to have a debate with a candidate with a popularity of 20%, because it means automatically moving such popularity to the less popular. Of course, it would be a big mistake, and no one will do it. And you know about this. Why you use this argument? It's exactly, please be honest. If you will be honest, you will get more support inside country, but not outside country. And Vladimir Putin is going to establish dialogue with this new middle class. But first of all, this middle class should express themselves, what they want. Of course, they want honest election, but everybody wants honest election. Of course, Putin, with his popularity at 60%, wants to have honest election first of all. And we want to help this middle class to be political organized, but
Sergei,
to have a real political leader, but not falsificator.
Sergei, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We're out of time. Ilya, I can't even give you the right of reply, I'm afraid, because the news waits for no man. We've got to end it there. Thank you to all our guests in Moscow, Sergei Alexandrovich Markov; in London, Vlad Strukov; and also in Moscow, Ilya, Faybisovich. And thank you for joining us on this Inside Story. Send us your feedback. As always, just email your thoughts to insidestory@aljazeera.net. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again. Bye for now.